Right. Hello, everyone. Good evening and a very warm welcome to Baker McKenzie. We are delighted to be hosting you all this evening for this Women in Telecoms and Technology event. We have a really interesting evening lined up. Huge thanks to Sarah for coming across to Baker McKenzie to speak to us this evening. And so, without delaying the excitement, I will pass across to Annette, who can tell us a bit more about WiTT and what we've got planned for this evening. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sarah. So hello, everybody. It's really lovely to see a crowd of people again. I think we've missed this. And our last two events have been on Mondays, which I think is not such a good day. So really glad we managed to get this sorted, that it's now a Tuesday or another day when we're all in town. And welcome, everybody. So it's my job to introduce Sarah and tell you very briefly. We'll do it actually at the end as to what we've got coming up in the next couple of events. But let me get on to Sarah. So Sarah Burnett is a renowned technology industry analyst and intelligent automation specialist. We'll find out what that is quite soon. She advises clients on smart and ethical technologies and best practice for adoption. She holds a number of different jobs, like so many of us at a certain age. We tend to have a number of different things that we do. And she's currently the Chief Technology Evangelist with KPI.ai and also a founding partner with Emergence Partners and a number of other companies. So I'm sure she'll mention those as she goes along. She's a very strong advocate of women in technology, as I think all of us are. And she's a member of the BCS Women's Committee and a founder of the AI Accelerator, an internationally recognized program focused on increasing diversity in the AI industry. So that's a really good thing. So having been ranked as one of top 20 most influential women in the UK tech sector, say, honoured to be in your presence by Computer Weekly for several years. In 2021, Sarah was inducted in the paper's influential Women in Tech Hall of Fame. Wow, did you have to put your fingers on the pavement as a recognition for her achievements? Anyway, we're really delighted to have you, Sarah. She's going to talk about her new book, and please welcome Sarah to WiTT.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and super to see you all here tonight. Just wanted to show you the cover of the book because it's caused some confusion with the Singapore Towers there. The publishers, they love this kind of different quirky style, and this was seen to, it basically gave a sense of the future, and that's why they chose it. And it was also pretty, I think, and actually they did a vote. They posted it online on LinkedIn, and they had another alternative. I'd picked two out of the selection that they'd chosen, shortlisted, and this got the highest number of votes. So people preferred this to the other one. So, so there you go. That's the story of why we have the Singapore Towers on there. And my boss at KYP.ai, he's currently in Singapore. He messaged me yesterday saying, now I know where the cover of your book comes from. So let me tell you what really led me to write this book. I had a lot to say because at the time, a few years ago, in fact, for about 17 years, I've been an industry analyst. And industry analysts look at the market, the technology market, look at what's coming in terms of leading edge technologies and how those are going to impact the way that companies use technology and also the competitive landscape. What does it mean for existing players in the market? And you will have seen, assessments of technologies. There are various sort of magic quadrants and so on. So if you follow the industry analyst world, you'll know what I'm talking about. But one great benefit of being an industry analyst is that people want to tell you about their product. So they invite you to go and visit them. And because of that, I was very lucky to actually get to see products and solutions being developed, often either in the service delivery center where they were being delivered for customers, or even before that in terms of innovation centers and so on. And I was blown away with some of the things that were coming through. One example is in Bangalore in India. On the campus of one of India's biggest service providers, I got to see some of the early uses of natural language processing in terms of intelligent document processing, and they were actually delivering services for a client that was a loan servicing company. And because it's very document heavy as a process, they were speeding everything up, a lot of cross-referencing, a lot of checking details in documents and ensuring that everything was up to date. And because they were doing it much faster, they were giving the customer several advantages. Not only were they doing things faster, but they were creating capacity for that customer. So it allowed the customer to actually grow its business because of this application of AI. Another example, which has now become more commonplace, but was really leading edge at the time, was a health app, a startup that I visited in San Francisco. And it was more than the kind of app that we have today that we've grown accustomed to, where you want to talk to your GP and you have a call with the GP on the phone, because behind the scenes, it had some degree of intelligence. And it was actually providing some advice to the patient while searching its database of GPs around the world and identifying the ones that had dealt with similar kind of conditions before. And then also recording the kind of advice that the GPs were giving, and then providing the GPs with advice about what their previous, what their colleagues had done. So never actually diagnosing, because that's a huge topic. IBM tried to do, to get Watson to become a doctor and just couldn't get through because the knowledge is huge. The amount of training that would require is absolutely massive. But enough to help, to complement what the GPs were doing. And this service was available to anyone across the world. So companies that had staff geographically scattered around the world could actually get them to talk to a GP really quickly. And I'm sure you recognize the usefulness of that. If you're stuck out somewhere and there isn't easy access to hospitals or doctors, you can at least get seen really quickly. On another occasion, again in Silicon Valley, I visited an innovation center, and the kind of things I was seeing there was just mind-blowing. So the future of how you might work from your kitchen, for example, how totally integrated disembodied voices that would talk to you and help you through your kitchen chores, and then maybe help you with your shopping or ordering takeaways and that kind of thing, and interacting with restaurants and delivery companies. And another thing that really caught my eye was the 3D, the holographic imaging that would be used to train engineers to fix complicated machinery in the field, and then have them, sort of improve on the way that we do things. And in fact, in the book, I talk about innovation extensively, AI-powered innovation, because really AI itself is an innovation, but it's also an enabler of innovation, because you can mix and match different aspects of it with different technologies and achieve things that have never been achieved before. And that is exactly why money has been pouring into the AI industry. I work for a small German company that does process intelligence, productivity intelligence. And, we get approached multiple times about being acquired or being invested in. And that's just one thing. There's so much. There's data in the book about the amount of money that's poured into this sector. And it's not just private equity, it's also governments. Every government wants to make sure that their country is at the leading edge of this development. And so they're pouring money, there are grants, there are all kinds of things, So that's on the buy side of the market, but on the that's on the sell side of the market. So that's where companies are developing solutions and they want to sell those solutions to enterprises. In my role as the head of intelligent automation research at Everest Group, which is an analyst firm, we also looked at the buy side of the market and how people were using these technologies. So in this study, which I managed to publish in my book with the permission of Everest Group, we interviewed 49 enterprises and we asked them how they were mixing and matching intelligent automation solutions. So these are things like from dumb robots like RPA robots to intelligent virtual agents, to intelligent document processing, advanced analytics, all of those things, how they were using those. And then we ranked them, we assessed them for their capabilities and the maturity of the adoption, the approach to adoption, and also the results that they were getting. And then we chose 8 of those. We assessed 8 of them here, as you can see, to be the pinnacle, to be at the pinnacle of the group. And the results were just phenomenal. So you'll see here that 50% of pinnacle enterprises had achieved cost efficiencies of more than 60%. I mean, this really is phenomenal efficiency achievements. Even the ones that weren't in the leading group, they, a third of them had achieved similar kind of figures. And then there were others that had achieved at least 20%. The majority, basically, over 75% of these companies had achieved efficiency targets and efficiency savings of over 20%. And this has been going for years, for decades. Organizations have been implementing things to become more efficient. And this literally, I mean, you hear about a step change. It's a term that's really overused, but in these cases, it's absolutely true. We're talking about a step change. And of course, this is in the area where intelligent automation was applied. So the kind of benefits that we're achieving, let's start with flexible capacity. So take an insurance company, where there is a flood or some kind of natural disaster. They get a flood of claims coming through, and typically there's a delay in processing those claims. But if they start using these technologies, they can actually process those a lot faster. And that's where they get the flexible capacity, because once the backlog is cleared, they would never actually get a backlog because they would process everything quickly. They can then wind down the operations and go back to normal levels. So that's one example. Embedded compliance, the varieties, the different ways that people deliver processes, they can diverge quite significantly from the standard processes that are approved and recommended. And this could leave them with risks of regulatory failures. And so by encoding them into robots, you can ensure that these things are running according to how they're supposed to run. Just some examples there. So I've got the cost savings that I've already mentioned, staff improvement in terms of productivity. You may have heard of attended automation versus unattended automation. This is where people can actually activate some kind of automation when they need it. So you can actually help them become more productive. And of course, things like voice interfaces. I don't know about you, but I now dictate most of my written stuff. I don't actually type anything. And I also get the machine to read things back to me. So, all of this is additional sort of improvements to my productivity. So, a lot of the areas where these things are being applied are in the back office. So things like transactional accounting, procurement. By the time you've automated most of these functions of an organization, maybe less so in recruitment, but that's also increasing. I mean, I know companies that have significantly increased their recruitment processes, improved their recruitment processes by doing things through virtual agents and so on. But we're talking about incremental increases, some areas much more automated than others. But where is it leading? Where is all of this leading? And this left me with questions like, what does it mean for the enterprise? What about the way that we work today? What about the models that we use for knowledge work in office-based environments? And what about the ethics of it? What about jobs for humans? So these are the questions that I answer in the book. And I have no doubt that we have started this journey. We are traveling towards the autonomous enterprise. When the book was published, several people got in touch with me and said, no, it'll never happen because AI doesn't have context. And I said, well, I have news for you, because there are already autonomous enterprises out there. So one example to me is Ocado. Ocado has loads of people working for it, and going autonomous doesn't mean that there will be nobody working in the enterprise. But they have, I don't know if you've seen the videos of their robots in the back office. They are carrying products around, they're sorting out the supply chain, and they also run analytics, loads of analytics every day. They boast that they've actually managed to reduce food waste. They've halved the food waste that comes from not rotating products fast enough and well enough. The innovation shouldn't be lost on us. The fact that they entered a crowded market, which was the British supermarket business, and they have carved a niche for themselves. And now they're actually rebadging their offering and running online services for other major supermarkets. In addition, they're also going abroad. They're now offering their services to customers abroad, to America and elsewhere. So they have innovated, they've grown, and they've established themselves over the last 20 years. Another example is, you may have heard of Lemonade Insurance in America, which was set up to be more or less entirely automated. So they've got a virtual agent that assesses the risk as people go online and they answer questions. It then quotes and handles the registration and onboarding of the customer. When it comes to claims, it also handles that. There are still people in the company that are running the automation. They're looking after it. They're supervising it. They're also dealing with anything that the automation can't work with. So, there are always exceptions that need handling. And they actually pride themselves on the level of automation per head. So they're also helping their own employees do things faster and better through making these kinds of capabilities available to them as well. So, context or no context, in the view of some people, they are here. Autonomous enterprises are already here. And with these kind of benefits, you can be sure that companies will be investing in more of these types of technologies. So what are the characteristics? You can't just become autonomous. You do need a particular kind of mindset. The Lemonade crowd, they started from scratch. It was a greenfield site, and they decided they were going to set up something that would address the shortcomings of the existing insurance model. They wanted to make it very efficient, and they also have some kind of charity giving associated with their model. But it's all about joined up. If you run something that is half automated, and then the result of that automation gets stuck somewhere because it's completely, there's nothing that flows through the entire process, that's not going to make you an autonomous enterprise. You need to be joined up with other parts of the organization. You also need to be willing to get people on board with your development. So one of the things that I did when I was still at Everest Group was to interview the folks at Siemens Global Business Services. They're the shared services arm of Siemens. And believe me, they have some amazing technology. And the chief executive was telling me that he wants people to be on board. He wants them to understand what the technology is going to do, how it's going to impact them. In fact, they were one of the pinnacle, and in fact, they came top of the pinnacle assessment. And one thing that they do is they create this kind of playground where staff can go and play with the new technology and understand what it does, so they don't feel threatened by it. So you need that kind of mindset. And you also need to keep an eye on the horizon. You need to know what's coming and set your goals for where you want to be in the future, while also achieving your immediate goals. So it's no good just leaving legacy systems as they are now, while investing in ultra-modern technology when you can't achieve your intermediate goals. So it's this kind of balancing act that you need to do. So I'm certain we are en route to the autonomous enterprise, but it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to be a journey with lots of intermediate destinations, and there'll be lots of changes as well that happen en route. Going back to Siemens, so I wanted to show how technologies are being deployed. So one of the case studies, I have 4 real-life case studies in the book. They're all named and they all have their drivers, their benefits, how they did it. They're all in their case studies. Let me just tell you about Siemens again. They have something like 12 delivery centers around the world. This is their global business, GBS business. And they get something like 7 million service tickets a year. So every time one of their customers rings and says they want something done, like maybe the chain of command has changed for some kind of approvals process, they have to implement that change. And initially, they developed this bionic agent, which would just signpost the inquiry that was coming in to the right team. So it was a very partial, very basic automation. But over a year, they developed the bionic agent, and it sort of learned the requirements for different sides of things, different parts of things. So, for example, in accounting or in invoice processing or other back office functions. And so from signposting, it moved on to actually processing the requirements, like, changing the chain of command for approvals. So where it's been deployed, 70% of processes have been automated. And I'll leave you to do the math, 7 million tickets. If you reduce the processing time by half, just think what savings they're achieving. And of course, they're leaving the end bit. They've deliberately left the end bit. They call it their quality gate, where a human checks what the robot has done before they finally finish the case and notify the customer that the work has been done. But this, I hope you get the sort of incremental development. As they're going from learning just to signpost incoming requirements to actually handling the incoming requirements, they're also learning an awful lot about how AI works and what they need to do. And they can now apply this to other areas of business. So they've got a template effectively. And this kind of reusability was really important to them. So sort of focusing on the fact that, they were originally signposting and, they've now changed to actually having deliveries, and looking at the bigger picture. What does that kind of development mean for the enterprise? I believe the heart of knowledge work in offices is going to change the way that we do things. So at the moment, you might go to an office like an insurance company or a telco, and you have people sitting working on computers, many of them from home since the pandemic, and often working with software on cloud. As time goes by, their roles will change. They will have robots here delivering the services, but some of these will be robots that are scheduled and programmed to run without anybody ever having to worry about how they run. Some of them will be those kind of attended automations that I was talking about, where we as workers will activate them when we want them. And that will really speed up processing, and it will help us become more productive. While this is all going on, we're also collecting masses of data. And the data is going to tell us give us a lot of insights. And this is where I go back to the innovation aspects. You can actually use AI to tell you what's working, what isn't working, what do customers want, where do they switch off, why are they actually leaving your company, why are partners actually deserting you. All this kind of insights can come through, and you can do some breathtaking kind of innovations. So the things that I'm predicting include microservices, where certain types of services where, we've had outsourcing, which have been sort of the whole of the back office function. Maybe finance and accounting has been outsourced to service providers, or procurement has been outsourced, or multiple functions have been outsourced. Now I'm talking about really new innovative services. So you might end up with things like the fruit picking to punnets process. There's the sky's the limit. You can actually now mix and match technologies. And I talk about phygital in my book, which is the combination of physical and digital. This is where, for example, fruit picking, you'll be needing a robot to do the fruit picking. Another example is, if you're doing insurance and you want to add a black box to cars, that's a phygital capability that you'll be creating, and how you integrate the requirements for that, how you integrate the supply of black boxes with, whatever else you're offering. These things will really matter and will make a huge difference in terms of competitive edge and differentiation. Other examples that I'm seeing where, new things, it's not just the technology, it's also models for delivering services. So the way that you price things, where you deliver the services. You could, for example, have house building. And actually, interestingly, all of this is also extending into areas, into industries that until now have not been terribly technology oriented. So you could actually have materials all where a 3D building is being printed. So basically what I'm saying is it is going to turn lots of things around and do actually open up loads of opportunities. So let's move on to this is just IT best practice. This is what you need for in order to become an autonomous enterprise. Good data. You get the best AI engine and you give it rubbish data and it gives you rubbish results. There's just no question about that. But the way that you capture knowledge and the way that you version it and you manage it, if you'll be able to roll things back if things go wrong, if machines break, who's going to run your services? So knowledge capture, curation, maximizing, modernizing and maintaining infrastructure. I can't tell you the number of companies I've come across that have really ancient infrastructure that are actually a risk. They're cybersecurity risks. And to us, to their clients, because they've failed to update. There are companies that are running systems that Microsoft no longer supports. These leave huge gaps in cybersecurity. And of course, I'm sure, like me, many of you have been affected by hacks where people have stolen our data, and goodness knows what they're doing with it. Managing skills. Who's going to be taking over in future when the current generation of managers and senior people retire? What skills are they going to bring to the table? And how do you prepare the younger folks coming through? And indeed, how do you then keep the knowledge going in those machines on these intelligent systems that you've deployed? And of course, adopting to new work models. In fact, innovating, creating your own new working models and charging models, fee structures, delivery models. The world is really your oyster if you want to start being one of those disrupting companies that make the headlines, if you want to be the future Uber or the future Airbnb. So that takes me to the fact that, I've drawn a straight line. The picture is of a straight line, but actually I think there'll be many turns and twists along the road because the technology itself will change. Just the other day, I was reading about the kind of AI that you now talk to, and it actually draws what you're telling it. So, you can actually define a concept and have the visualization done by AI. It is also opening a whole can of worms in terms of IP and, you know, style of art and who's copying who and that kind of thing. Another example, in fact, the company I work for, KYP.ai, we have just announced the Knowledge Automator, which is, you know, on the one hand, we capture information that shows how processes are done and who the experts are in the process. And then through a partner, we then automate the knowledge work. We actually use symbolic AI and various kinds of trees, decision trees, constraint trees, and so on, to actually then automate the steps that an expert takes. So pushing those boundaries all the time, and it's going to happen, and it's only going to accelerate. And that's really a kind of visualization that I put in the book. So if you're as old as me, you'll know that in the old days, you used to go to a shop to buy a car, you used to go to a showroom, drive it, test drive it, and then order it, and you'd go back and pick it up when it was manufactured. These days, things have changed. You do a lot of these things online, and they might even deliver. So this second row is about the manufacturer actually, or the dealer delivering it to you. The third row is when some of those aspects of delivery become automated. So you might have the loading mechanism that is automated. You might have the delivery van actually being autonomous as well. And in future, you might actually have the car drive itself to your house. I mean, you know, we're talking about autonomous vehicles. So it's a continuous evolving journey. So that brings me to the hot topic of what does it mean for jobs? What are we all going to be out of work in a few years' time? I don't think so. I'm very optimistic about this. So when I was writing the book, I did some research on this topic, and the charts that you see here were the picture at the time of writing the book. So this one here is the US unemployment figures, and this was the pandemic here. And as you can see, as the pandemic was fading, the rate has returned to 20 years ago, September 2001. In those 20 years, a lot has happened. Just think of how often you now visit a bank. You know, how often do we actually use paper money? Think about how we travel now. You know, lane, we do everything online at the airport. So the huge degree of automation that's already gone on, and yet unemployment rate is still the same as it was 20 years ago. The UK case is even more interesting because that one is about back to 50 years ago. As you see here, this is 1971. And just think about the population explosion. And when I was a child, I didn't think I would grow up and become an industry analyst. That role didn't exist. So it's about new roles being created, new things that we need to learn and do. So managing the robots, managing the development of robots, the updating, the supervision, planning customer journeys. How many times have you visited a website which has taken you round and round, page after page, actually not ever answering your question and giving you a terrible experience? That's all about customer experience management. And it requires some creativity. It requires good design. And so it's not all about technology people either. It's about people with artistic talents as well. But I have no doubt that we do need to retrain quite a lot of people, and we need to focus on training and skills development, because that's where I think the problems would arise if we weren't clever enough to run programs that would encourage people to move into the required new sets of skills. And what about the ethics of it? This is actually quite a worrying thing. A few years ago, a few eminent scientists wrote a paper. These included scientists from Cambridge, Oxford, Imperial, all the big well-known universities. And they said that malicious AI is something that can be very dangerous. In fact, it could make life intolerable on Earth and even lead to human extinction. And they're not kidding. And you can't take that kind of, threat lightly. We do need ethics. We do need to make sure that AI doesn't become the sort of tool that dictators love and nobody else loves. And also the way that we develop AI, we have to make sure that the world doesn't become defined only in terms that AI can understand, and people who fall outside those groups, their definitions, will then miss out on whatever it is that we're defining. So it's really important that we get the ethics of it right. There are things happening, guidelines being developed by different organizations, by governments, and so on. But in my view, not fast enough. And I also think that it's not just AI, it's technology as a whole. The kind of things, the kind of fiascos that we had with, people's social media data being freely accessed by political organizations of a few years ago. That wasn't about AI. That was about bad practice. And the same thing with things like location tracking, location tracking by apps that you put on your phones and you don't know they're tracking you because they don't tell you, is totally wrong. It shouldn't be allowed, but it goes on. When Apple announced that they were going to allow people to choose whether they were tracked or not, the majority of people chose not to be tracked. And it actually leads to risks for people, for women in violent relationships, where, that could be a physical risk, for example. So just some examples. So when people talk about AI and the ethics of AI, ask them about technology as a whole. What are we doing about making technology more sustainable? What are we doing about, where we are mining stuff for batteries? What are we doing with the stuff that we no longer use? How is your technology company handling those? Then also ask them about AI. I think we can only make companies sit up and take note and take action if we ask all these questions. So there's the book. I'm very happy to tell you that the publisher has given me a discount code. Should you be interested, if you type Burnett, all capital letters, on the BCS bookshop, you'll get 35% off. That brings me to Q&A.
Thanks so much, Sarah. That was so interesting. Just a question on the point you just raised on AI ethics and technology as a whole. So you raised the point, and it's so true that there is always, in a sense, a chasing of trying to, especially, kind of speaking at it from a very much a pure lawyer perspective, of legislating for technology, and you're doing it after the event. And we're seeing it at the moment with online safety, for example. The government's desperately trying to push through online safety at a point where that has been a pervasive issue on platforms for years. Do you have a view on how you can actually get ahead, especially within the AI field? How can you, in a sense, preemptively legislate or preemptively impose these good practices in an area where it is so fast moving and so fast developing?
I think it's a very difficult problem. I do think the industry needs to be actively doing it for themselves. But, the EU, for example, is putting out legislation, enforcing things. So you can do it as a government. I know it's always a bit behind, but it's in my mind, we've got to have to put pressure as buyers and ask them when we buy things, ask technology vendors, what are they doing? How are they doing it? And, as buyers, we have massive power that we can use. That's one way. And otherwise, I think we'll be in the same boat as we have been with the way that our data is used and shared without, even legislation like, the EU's data protection legislation is still not really handling that side of things well enough. So unfortunately, I think, unless we pressurize the technology vendors and also our governments to do more, I don't think we'll get ahead. Yeah.
So thanks very much for that talk. It's super interesting. And your answer to Tasha's question as well. You mentioned a really interesting point just now about data privacy and how a lot of consumers in the Apple context chose to not share their location data. Then you raise the other interesting side of that, that it can help with safety and tracking women, particularly in violent situations. And I suppose that's an area of winning back consumer trust in technology. How do you suggest that balance is kind of shifted and perception has changed, and how that journey will go from here to the future?
Well, I think large technology companies, some of them are actively now, things like IBM refusing to do facial recognition. I think that's a big step forward. So that's one thing. So there's some of that going on, but also consumer awareness about how the data is used, and things like sharing your photos, which are then used for facial recognition training, that kind of thing, and possibly other uses. I think just being aware of how things can be used is important. And then you can make informed decision. If you want to help develop AI, then you can share those things. If you don't want, if you value your privacy and you don't want those things shared. So that's important too. But I think, we do need to rebuild trust in technology, because if we refuse to use them, like, I don't know about you, but I don't use Alexa at home. I've switched it off. But I'm also depriving Alexa of, the sort of training that I would get if I was using it. And if many of us do that, then that's an issue for technology vendors. We do want those systems to become better and good at what they do. So, it's all about balancing, but having the right frameworks and guidance in place that would rebuild trust in technology.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been reading Kai-Fu Lee's book, AI Superpowers, where it's talking about, how China's been developing AI and different from here. And you were just mentioning about, turning off Alexa. IBM won't use facial recognition, but, we've got other societies that are doing it in a completely opposite way.
Yeah.
And do you see us coming to a collision course in terms of how AI is going to be? I mean, because they're automating at a faster pace and coming up with greater innovation on these autonomous enterprises, perhaps, than what we're doing.
I think there is a huge risk that where there are those kind of governments that will use the sort of malicious sides of AI. That is a huge problem, and I don't think the democracies of the world can do much about that, other than putting their own houses in order. But I go back to the report about malicious uses of AI, and that is unfortunately a reality. Like virtually imprisoning people because they can't go out because they'll be watched, and all kinds of issues. It is a minefield, and we do need to look at it. But there are areas where we can influence, and there are geographies where we have no power. We can't influence those.
Real quickly, can you explain ecosystems of digital twins? Is that the same thing as an autonomous enterprise, or is that what you were talking about, the physical?
Digital. So the digital twins have been around for a while. So, like, once I visited one of the Siemens factories, and they had a digital twin of a person working in the workstation, how they would twist, and sort of working out the ergonomics of their workstation, and then identifying the best way to lay things out for the person working. Often it's actually to do with a physical structure, like maybe a manufacturing line. Sorry about that, a manufacturing line, or that kind of workstation. Now, there's a lot of talk of digital twins of processes, business processes. So they don't have a physical physical. They're not physical entities, but I think in practice it's very difficult to do. But if you can create that kind of digital twin of your process, and then see where things are going wrong and address them, it'd be hugely powerful. And we are on the way to that, because with process intelligence, we're already seeing, I don't know if you've seen these spider diagrams of process flows where, for example, it should be going in a straight line like this with different steps. and people are jumping the steps. They're doing these kinds of things. So we're on the way there. And I think there are also these companies that create a layer of data on top of all your solutions, so you can get answers to questions quickly, so the data is integrated and is available at a press of a button, and you can ask questions like, what were my sales today, and have an instant answer. These kinds of things are starting to appear, and I think they will feed into the process digital twin.
Thank you. Very interesting talk, and particularly about AI. I think one of the things that comes to my mind is that there's a lot of different technologies that all feed into this. And I was just wondering, I mean, we're looking quite a lot at things like metaverse and blockchain. Where do you see those sort of technologies fitting into the autonomous enterprise?
Well, I think on the sort of blockchain side, it will change the way that some of the sort of financial stuff gets done. And also the way that you might trace things and track things will change. I'm not sure there's that much AI in that. I think it's still very much the kind of structure of the way that you do this kind of decentralized solution. With the metaverse, of course, sort of gaming technology has been pushing the boundaries of AI, things like non-player characters, how they behave, will they change? So maybe some of that and some more gamification of processes, and maybe some kind of reward and encouragement for staff to do things better. I think all of these things will come into the enterprise. There's always a lag from consumer technologies up towards B2B kind of technologies, but it's certainly very exciting. And of course, in terms of providing additional information with goggles and helping people, engineers in the field, deliver things more quickly, all of those, I think, open a whole load of new opportunities.
Thank you.
Sarah, I was just wondering whether you think there's going to be robots on the board?
I think there could be, yes. There could be robots, initially, just to provide information instantly there and then. But over time, there could be, highly logical robots that might actually provide that kind of, measured, data-driven ideas for the board. So there could be.
That starts to make you sort of really think about how this thing might change completely. So it's not just some people driving robots as if they were process machines. They're actually becoming intelligent enough to participate on a one-to-one basis.
Well, only in very limited application areas. So the idea of a sort of general all-knowing AI is still very much sci-fi, because every area that AI learns about needs masses of data for that AI to understand what it is and how to do things. And if you multiply that by all the things that humans can do, we're still not there. We can't do that. That kind of capability doesn't yet exist. So it could be an AI that knows only about certain things that it can then advise on. And even that depends on how well it's implemented. The number of virtual agents that I use that are absolutely rubbish, and they put people off virtual agents because they haven't been trained properly. They haven't got the context. There's one of the case studies in my book is actually to do with Calderdale Council, where they implemented a virtual agent, but the way they implemented it was truly best practice. And they've got the ability for their staff to update the knowledge literally in a matter of few hours. So they can, over the pandemic, for example, it was able to answer questions about new government requirements that would just come overnight. But that's because of the way they've implemented it. So the way that they've built the intents that it can process, the way that it can understand utterances and words and sentences and so on. it's a very interesting case study, and I think if we had more of that kind of development, it would build a lot more trust, in virtual agents, because unfortunately the bad ones put everyone off, and that's the problem.
I think this might be an extension of Tasha's question, but I wondered if you had a view on the UK government approach on AI regulation, where they set out a series of principles and then sort of left it, or suggested that it will be left to the regulators to implement. Whether you had any thoughts on that?
I don't particularly, I must admit, I think we're still playing catch up, and I think we're a long way behind. But given all the problems that the government has, maybe that's a good thing, maybe just leave it to the industry to address it for now anyway. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it just really leaves it to me to thank you very much, Sarah, for a really fascinating and quite challenging book and explanation of that book around what maybe we'll all be working for at some stage, an autonomous enterprise. And I find that both scary and challenging and potentially actually energizing. Mm-hmm. So all of those things I think are something we need all to think about. But I think thank you very, very much for such a really good explanation of what it's all about. So thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.